Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to think, what is positive communication? What are we talking about here? And again, I'll offer just a point of departure. I don't think I have the definition of positive communication. I think it means different things to different people. I am more interpersonally based than others, but for me, kind of how the idea of it comes together is actually mostly responding to a lifelong question. And the question for me is, what does it look like when we communicate at our best?
Hello, and welcome to Stories Lived, Stories Told, a dialogue driven podcast exploring how to create better social worlds through better communication. I'm Abbie, and today I invite you to join me in conversation with Julien Mirivel as we take a communication perspective on the art of positive communication. To take a communication perspective is to consider what we are making and how we are making it through our communication practices. It means seeing ourselves as active participants with choices about how we show up to each other. It is paying attention to patterns, context, stories, and relationships to better understand how meaning gets made. It is embodying curiosity, mindfulness, collaboration, and dialogue to co-create better social worlds. So, whether the topic of conversation today is familiar to you or not, the idea is that by looking at communication instead of through it, in this conversation and in all that we do, we expand our collective imagination through both storytelling and story hearing, revealing new ways of seeing and being for all of us. At the top of the episode, you heard our conversation partner today, Julien Mirivel. Julien is the author of The Art of Positive Communication and the co-founder of the Positive Communication Network. Something I would have you listen for in today's conversation is, what are the small things, the really doable things that you could try right now, today, from this conversation that could make a really big difference? Because I think Julien and I get to a point in this conversation of appreciating that the scale of our issues and struggles can seem so large, and that in many ways the answer is to go small and to be where you are and make changes in your everyday communicating and your everyday relationships, because there is a sense of larger powerlessness in many ways that can lead us to just get completely paralyzed in our lives. And we need to be fighting that. And so we invite you to look for the critical moments, or the bifurcation points, as we would say in CMM, where you can make a choice and communicate differently and create something better together. Before we jump in with Julien, I also want to take a moment to announce and celebrate that the word is officially out that the CMM Institute is hosting our very first, hopefully first annual CMM conference. We have named this the Collective Learning Conference, and this next year's theme will be Living the Questions, Navigating Complexity and Clarity. So if this podcast, if any other work you're doing has made you really excited and curious about CMM and what it can do in your personal world, in your social worlds, whatever they may be, then I would encourage you to try to join us. The conference will be next year, June 17th and 18th, 2027 in Birmingham, UK. I'm including a link to an interest form, which you can currently fill out in the show notes here. And if you want to follow myself or the CMM Institute on LinkedIn or Substack, those are going to be the best places to stay up to date as registration goes live, call for workshop proposals goes live, and we just get more information together as this dream becomes a reality. So I hope that I might get to meet you in person next year in Birmingham, UK in June 2027. Let's jump in with Julien. Hi, Julien. Thanks so much for recording with me today.
Hi, Abbie. It's good to see you. I'm glad to spend some time together.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you because I'm so interested in the work you're doing. I see such an alignment between the work that both of us are doing. And in particular, I'm excited to be speaking with you today. This is me diving right into my own answer to the question of what am I bringing with me into this conversation? because I have kind of a deep one to start us off with. I hope you're okay
That's
going there
totally
with me.
fine.
Okay, thank you. We have this great local art house cinema right down the street from where I
Okay.
live. It's called the Can in Indianapolis. It's just wonderful. And they play a lot of some mainstream movies, but some other, different indie stuff. And it's just great. And I just seen a documentary called Steal This Story, Please. That's
Mm-hmm.
about journalist Amy Goodman, who hosts Democracy Now!
Okay.
And is just an incredible journalist and has put herself in so many insane situations, and has this philosophy about you go to where these things are happening, you go to the people and you have to talk to the people on the ground. Just a really wonderful sense that you and I would understand about the power of stories and
Yeah.
who's telling stories. And I just said the power of stories, but all like the power, literally, like in
Yeah.
terms of power dynamics in the world, and the way that stories plays into that. And so I have to admit, I'm feeling a little sad and a little daunted by just, feeling really confronted with how large the issues of our world are,
Yeah.
and how powerless you can feel as an individual when the framing is it's the system of capitalism, it's big corporations, it's people with the power with the millions and billions of dollars that are doing these things to people in other countries or to their own communities. And
Mm-hmm.
where do you even start as a just one person?
Yeah.
And so I always come back to interpersonal communication because it's where my heart is, of course, and it's
Yeah.
what I spend my day doing. And so sometimes I find myself spiraling down this path of, does this even matter? Just when I'm at my worst, I have that thought to myself. And then most of the time I go, no, it's so important, it's so important.
It's
But I think
yeah.
it's tempting. I have this image in my head of like, I think people will be familiar with this, like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
of like food and shelter, which I think maybe has been contested. Other people have opinions, but
Sure. Sure. But it's a
it does
model.
make some sense. Yeah. You have these, basic survival requirements, and then you get up to the other things where you can achieve different versions of, actualization. And so I think there's a version of that people maybe apply to things like communication, where it's like,
Yeah.
well, thinking about my interpersonal communication, studying it, making different choices, taking the time to understand what's going on, that's the top of the pyramid thing. That's like a luxury. I think people maybe think that way, feel that way.
Sure.
And in a lot of ways it is, because it's about access, and it's about, if you have the privilege of time. And I just want to flip the pyramid. Like I want to, and I do believe that communication, like positive communication, to use your language, generative communication, better quote unquote communication. I just wonder what would change, or how we could be different together in the world if we kind of adopted this collective perception that communication is the base of the pyramid, in the sense of, if we did take the time to prioritize that, then all of this change would follow,
Mm-hmm.
rather than let's get all of our other shit together and then we can worry about that. Like what if we saw it as fundamental,
Yeah.
again, particularly in the context of this documentary I've just watched, where I'm like, what's being made here, to use that
Yeah.
CMM-ish language, and is that a question that people are even asking, and do they have the tools to ask and answer and change that question through communication? So that's the whole pile of mess I'm coming into this conversation with. I know it's all order to explore that, but I just think, particularly knowing that your work uses the language of positive communication,
Mm-hmm.
I wonder about how you see that, or how people might see that as like an antidote to, I'll just speak for myself at least, but like a sense of helplessness that I can
Mm-hmm.
feel when I'm looking at what's going on in the world, which I do feel is important to look at. I don't
Yeah.
want to look away. I don't want to be ignorant,
Sure. Sure.
but it's hard to look at it.
Sure.
And what do we do? And what are we making? So that's me.
Yeah. Deep breath. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Julien, what are you arriving with today, or what are you bringing with
Well,
you?
now I feel like I want to respond to this.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, first, I mean, yeah, I felt like that many times. I think
Yeah.
that's probably a universal experience. As you were speaking, I was thinking of Jiddu Krishnamurti, who, Indian philosopher, essentially says, listen, we're not going to solve world problems by attacking the world problems. Really argued and suggested that we can only solve, if we're going to solve that, the first thing we have to solve is the way we relate to each other. Because he says to be is to be related. And I think that's where I see, so I think about like these ideas of positive communication. I really think like I can't change that whole world. I mean, I'm just one person. And some people have more impact than others. Some people have more influence than others. But we are influential in the relationships that we embody. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm trying to remember the direct quote, but it's like, don't worry about changing the world, but change the world of your spouse, change the world of your work, change the world of your children. And there you can bring change, and that change will move, and kind of create this ripple effect. So that's one reaction to what you just said, even though I have felt this dialectical tension many times about even asking the question, does it matter? Does me improving my communication skills matter? And in the grand scheme of things, and in the impossibility of it sometimes, and then other times I'm reminded of what it does for the people with whom I am connected in my world, and I think there makes a difference. So anyway, hopefully we can continue the conversation. But I did want to throw Jiddu Krishnamurti in there because I was thinking about that as I was reacting to you. How am I arriving? Well, I guess maybe I'll bring a little bit more, but I don't know if positiveness is the word. But I was, as I was just telling you, I was just traveling, and so I always, when that happens, I think about openness to experience. I think about tasting new foods and appreciating the small things, whether that's a walk in the park, or it's sharing a moment with my spouse in a context where my 3 kids are not around. So you start to appreciate, you want to appreciate both, right? You want to appreciate when the whole family is together. You want to appreciate it when you and your spouse are together. So I'm arriving with that, literally, because I arrived back yesterday, arriving with that kind of experience of traveling, which to me is so important. And it brings me joy, brings me happiness. It's also a luxury, right? If we go back to some of what you said about, so I am lucky in the sense that I have the ability to do that. I have the funding to do that. I have, and so anyway, we can certainly reflect on that. And then I'm arriving with a book that I just read, and I don't know where this will go, but I'll put it out and we can think about it. But I'm sure you've heard of attachment theory. And Abbie Levine, who wrote a book called Attached, very famous, just came out with a new one called Secure. And as I was, reading that, just thinking a lot about relationships and how do you manage them when you don't feel secure. You are not a secure person. You are anxious, or you are avoidant, or, and so suddenly you're thinking, well, how can I navigate this world where people come from all of these very complex experiences? So I think I'm arriving with that book, and I'm arriving with that kind of experience traveling, which gives me a lot of joy, and spending time with my wife, which also gives me a lot of joy. So there
wonderful. Yeah, thank you for indulging me in that question. I found that to be a really important question, and sometimes I feel like, I'm getting ahead of myself. I haven't even had you introduce yourself yet, but I think I've really enjoyed it as a kind of starting place, and a little bit of a teaser, and get our brains
absolutely, I like
moving about what we might want to explore later. But to stop myself from getting ahead of myself, Julien, would you introduce you. You know, we're already getting a window into your life by how you've answered that question of how you're arriving. But in terms of continuing to introduce yourself, I wonder what else you would want to share. What do you want people to know about you?
Well, I mean, the simple thing is first, I'm a professor of communication here at the university professionally at the University of Arkansas Little Rock, where I have been. I can't believe this. I have been there. This is the end of my 21st year since we just finished the spring semester, so I'll start my 22nd year next year. I never saw that coming, but I have come to really love living in Arkansas. I think more important than my professional identity is being a kind of a family man, I guess you could say, a husband and a dad. My wife's name is Meg, and she works for Arkansas Children's Hospital in the foundation. Her background is really kind of PR, strategic communication. She actually was the director of the Arkansas Department of Health, and she led the response for COVID-19.
Wow.
When it took place. And then I've got 3 kids. So I've got an 18-year-old who is graduating high school this week. So I should have said that maybe I'm arriving with a bunch of unconscious emotions that could be released at any moment.
Sure.
And then my middle kiddo, his name is Jean-Luc, and he will be graduating 5th grade. And then my baby girl, Claire, who is 8 years old. Well, she's not graduating. She'll move on to 4th grade. That's probably enough.
Oh.
And then we're getting ready to go on another trip. So not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, we're all going to go to Europe together. So we've got that to look forward to. I mean, what else can I tell you? I try to be a balanced person, who is intellectually curious, who loves to learn. Probably the thing I love the most is learning new things. So I think travel speaks to that. Reading books speaks to that. I love to learn. I mean, I take lessons so I can improve my tennis game.
Great.
I like thinking about learning, and I like teaching. I think that since I stepped foot into a classroom when I was 21 years old at University of Colorado Boulder, I do enjoy that, and I think that I have a knack for it. So I think teaching is an important aspect of my identity. I think that writing is an important aspect of who I am. I enjoy the process of writing. I enjoy the puzzle of it. I even really enjoy the process that I think some people hate it, but I really enjoy that. And so balance in the sense of kind of like you've got your professional realm and then you've got your personal realm. And I do think there's a challenge. These things compete sometimes for time, for energy, and I really want to have a balanced life between intellectual, family, I would say even just kind of physical well-being. I'm somebody who's very active. I play a lot of tennis. And then community engagement. One of my favorite things that I've done in the last year and a half is I founded, but really with some of my guy friends, a guy dinner group.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's called Forks and Fellas. They would die if they knew this is going to be podcasted. So it's Forks and Fellas. And so every 6 weeks, and I'm thinking about right before we met, I sent a text to everybody. It was like, hey, we got to meet. So in 2 weeks from today, every 6 weeks, we kind of get together and we plan a whole elevated meal. This is what we call it, elevated. Most of it is French because I'm from France, and French cuisine is kind of like, the mantra. And we create a menu, and then a few guys go grocery shopping. Somebody else picks up wine, and then we get together. And every 6 weeks, we cook together.
Wow.
In a location that one of my friends found, not to be disclosed. And
sure.
And then we cook all night and we drink wine until we feel like going home. And really, that has been an amazing addition to kind of my life, to my experience. So yeah, I would say that's probably the most important thing, is that I
Yeah.
really like this little balance, and try to maintain it.
And I imagine if you're anything like me, then because your work world is about communication, the lines get a little blurry because it's not really something you turn off when you go home. You're still thinking about these things.
Sure.
For me, I talk about CMM and the communication perspective is it's just a lens. And as a glasses wearer, that makes sense to me that, if I the computer in front of me I'm looking at right now is the computer, but if I put my glasses on, then I'll maybe see it a little more clearly.
Sure.
So having a lens that changes the way you're looking at things and the way you're seeing and understanding your world is really meaningful to me. Um, I appreciate the way you've introduced yourself. So I want to kind of follow the lead that you're offering here because I want to talk about the positive communication network and
Mm-hmm.
positive communication as a field that you're really involved in, and I think have made a lot of additions to. So the way I want to specifically maybe prompt you to tell us about that is, do you have stories from your personal life with your wife, with your children, with your friends, with your colleagues that help us to understand maybe basically what is positive communication, as a field that's emerged, and
Yeah.
what makes you very passionate about that as a realm of study and I imagine practice.
Well, lots there, man. I don't even know. Sometimes I don't even know where to begin.
My
I
favorite
think
kind
it'd
of
be
question to
helpful.
ask.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to think, what is positive communication? What are we
Hmm.
talking about here? And again, I'll offer just a point of departure. I don't think I have the definition of positive
Sure.
communication. I think it means different things to different people. I am more interpersonally based than others. Um, but for me, kind of how the idea of it comes together is actually mostly responding to a lifelong question. And the question for me is, what does it look like when we communicate at our best?
Hmm.
That is really it. We are actuality, as Maslow points out, we are actuality and
Yes.
potentiality.
Yeah.
Inside of us, there's what we do, there's also what we're capable of doing. And sometimes these two things align. Sometimes my capacity as a person shines through. And I kind of want to know, as a communicator, what
Hmm.
does that look like? And the reason why I do this, I think, is because I had an amazing teacher as an undergraduate student. His name is Marvin Jensen, and he taught a class. And in that class, like he had several principles. One of which, by the way, is that relationship is the essential human need.
Well, there you go.
A second principle is that communication is relationship. It is not technique.
Ooh.
And even that one now, I'm really puzzling over that one still.
Yeah.
That's 27.
Yeah, what does
Well, I
that
graduated in
mean to
2000, so
you?
26 years. Well, more and more, more actually, I asked him in a letter recently. We still
Hmm.
communicated that way. So the way I understand it, the first part, I think we understand, right? Communication is relationship. It's you cannot relate without communication, and I teach that. So without communication, we cannot relate.
Hmm.
And more importantly, you have to realize that relating that communicating is the embodiment of relating.
Sure. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So I think if we and I think for CMM, that's kind of like a given, but it's
Yeah.
so important because
Yeah.
most people, they don't think that way. They think communication is about transmitting information.
Hmm.
They don't look at it as a constitutive process.
Hmm.
So to me, communication is relationship is kind of a key way of just teaching that very quickly.
Yeah.
But then you got the second part, not technique. So why is that? You can start puzzling over this. On the one hand, we can teach skills, and I do, and how
Hmm.
can people improve without developing skills? Okay. But on the other hand, if all you do is, I think the way I'm thinking about today is, if all you do is focus on mastering a technique, you are missing the whole point. You're missing the whole point, because the whole point is simply relating. And the more you focus on technique, actually, the more you would create an I-it relationship, which is kind of what we're doing.
Yeah, right.
So to kind of go back, so, Marvin Jensen kind of had these ideas, and he really, I think, believed in the ethical capacity for communication. So the whole journey for me really began with that question when I came to UALR. Even though I had been trained as a microethnographer, a discourse analyst, of course, I got published because I needed to do that. But I found myself returning to these ideas. And the big question was, when do we exemplify our potential as a father, as a teacher, as a friend, as a son, as a manager, as a coach? I mean, you can then add all of these professional roles, right? So for me, positive communication is any behavior. So it is things we do, not things we think, not things we feel. It is things we do that exemplify our potential. There are behaviors that are designed to enrich relationships. There are behaviors that illustrate our capacity to stretch ourselves in the direction of the great virtues: compassion, generosity, gentleness, justice. And we'll never embody those virtues, like we'll never be the virtue. But we can, I guess, to give a practical example, sometimes I'm a terrible listener. And you could ask my kids and be like, yep, he does not listen. He's just like totally lost in his own little head. But there are times where I really am.
Yeah.
And I've been wanting to understand when we do that, when am I a great listener? And then if I am a great listener, what am I doing that's different from just not being a good one? I'll stop here. I want to see how you're reacting to that.
Thank you. You caught the vibe that's coming through the computer, which is that I have so many thoughts. Let me think about which one I want to follow. I think what maybe the first thing I want to say is that I'm just going to clip the last minute of you speaking and play it as my alarm clock in the morning or something. Like, that is such a good reminder, particularly maybe for people that listen to this podcast and have heard me talk, use the CMM language of better social worlds and better communication. I'm doing air quotes around the better, because that's subjective, and that is to be TBD, to be defined and to be determined by us. What constitutes our better? How do we define that? There's not some better out there that is, objective and standard across the line. And I like to leave it open-ended like that, but I know that's maybe also challenging in some ways. And so I feel like you've just offered a really great, as you said, one of probably many definitions for that kind of better, that's what that means. And I really appreciate the phrasing of positive communication, because when I try to articulate what the goal is with all of this in our relationships, it's very tempting to go to do you want to achieve productive communication or unproductive communication? And that's my I live in a capitalist culture coming through. And so I really try to avoid that, where I'm like, it's not, like you said, it's not technique. It's not about productivity. It's about the being. And so, a word within CMM that's used a lot is generative communication. So that's something that, and so I like generative communication, positive communication. I like all the things that you've just described, to, again, just give people one option for understanding. When we say better communication, we're talking about communication that is us at our best, that is us seeking to embody the potential that we have, acknowledging that we're not probably ever doing that perfectly. Yeah. But I think that to me, the process is the point. The act of attempting to, the act of trying to, is the whole thing.
That's right. Yeah. And I think I would add that there is a bit of and I didn't put it in there, but there's a bit of a responsibility component from my vantage point. Because, I mean, communication is first consequential and it is irreversible.
Yeah.
And, there's each person has a responsibility for the way that they affect others.
Can I pause this right here? Actually,
Yeah.
because I've had some feedback of like some friends that listen to the podcast that have said like, oh, sometimes a conversation goes over my head, which,
Okay.
just sure. But because the CMM, I think, is so much about not taking for granted the shared meaning we're making, could you pause and explain a little more about what you mean by communication is consequential and irreversible?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So how is it consequential, right? First, communication affects who you are as a person. We know this. Nobody's debating that the fact that the way we communicate, even within ourselves, is shaping the kind of person that I am. And communication shapes, projects, produces, as I am doing right now, the kind of person that I am. So through what we call identity work. So that's one set of consequences. I'll give a practical example. Actually, that's really kind of changed my thinking about it too, is when we studied recent project that I've been involved in, is we studied people who live in outright poverty around the world. And we ask, and they've been trying to kind of change their lives for the better. One thing that changes is the way they think about who they are. But along the way, their communication changes. So we believe that it's changes in communication that actually creates the change in identity. Okay, we can come back to that. Second layer to me is your communication has an impact on the people around you.
Right, yeah.
So again, you take it very simply. At home, I'm a father. I've got 3 kids. I mean, we all know that our parents have influenced us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So, but also my partner. I influence my partner. I influence my students. I influence my colleagues. I influence and shape and impact if I do a training to 30 managers. So communication has a relational impact.
Yes.
And then, so I keep going through the layers. So it has the capacity to affect the environment around you. In CMM, the language always is, what are we creating together? So I'm a colleague, part of a department. Does my communication not impact that climate? Of course it does. What I say and do, how I show up in meetings, how I contribute, how I respond to my colleague, all of that shapes. So to me, so that's, and then I think it impacts our community. And then I know it sounds idealistic, but I'm going to say it anywhere, right? Because we've got this kind of creating better social world. The mission of my department, which we created in 2015, any faculty could literally cite it for you, is to foster the co-creation of better social worlds through positive communication. That's what we believe. So we believe that by doing that, if lots of people practice positive communication, then they are creating a better world, not just for themselves, but for other people. Does that help?
I think that really does. Yeah, thank you for taking the second to describe that and break that down, because I do think it's important. And again, to go back to language I like to use in CM, I'm not to overuse this, but it's something that is taken for granted, because people are so, without knowing it, embedded in the transmission model of sender, receiver, message. That's all that's going on. And I, just to share an example from my life too, is that I recently had a conversation with my partner where I was sharing that, I think I might go try this new thing. And he kind of dismissed it just because it's not something he would do. And I kind of paused because I was like, oh, that really made me feel something. And I want to try to name what that was. And so I said, again, things that you're like, it is helpful to be said, even if you think, you take for granted that it's shared. That I was like, what you think of me really matters to me. And so when you say, oh, I'm skeptical of that, that makes something that has consequences for me, because it makes me feel less inclined to go try this thing I was eager to try because you've been dismissive of it. And so we had really good conversation about that, where it is just like, yeah, we need to be reminded that the things we say to each other, it's about the turns and we're always responding. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
not isolated. And the image that comes to mind, which I hope you'll maybe even be able to add some layers on this based on your expertise and experience as you shared, is like a game of tennis. And I've used this metaphor in my life before because I have some people in my life that are maybe could benefit from positive communication, maybe are more negative communicators, bring a lot of like, I would say like fear or shame or judgment to
Yeah.
relationships. And the way I've used this metaphor before is like, okay, this is a game of tennis and you are lobbing this like shame ball across the line onto my side of the court, but
Uh-huh.
I don't have to return it. And so that's been the way I've kind of used
Mm-hmm.
this metaphor, is that this is a two-person thing. You brought over here, but I don't have to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think maybe to, adopt that metaphor over here in terms of like communication as a game of tennis. And again, that maybe oversimplifies things way too much, but I'm just thinking about this like the co-creative back and forth. It's not, I'm thinking of pickleball because so many people are playing that now, but I'm picturing like a wall and a glass box space. Like there's the game where people hit the ball and it's against a wall and then it just
Uh-huh.
comes back to them.
Yeah.
Paddleball, I don't know. I'll try to find the word for
Lots
that.
of little metaphors. Yeah.
Yes, right. So it's like, but that communication is not you in a box hitting a ball against a wall. It's coming back at you. It's you on a tennis court with
Mm-hmm.
a conversation partner or a tennis partner, playing this game together and making something together. And
Mm-hmm.
couldn't have hit the ball so far if your hit to me didn't make me run over here. I'm maybe getting lost in the metaphor, but I think it's something useful to, give an image to,
Mm-hmm.
again, so that people are just reminded that what you said, communicating is relating and communication is consequential. Hey, it's Abbie here, taking a pause in this conversation to invite you to reflect with me about how this episode is hitting you so far. If you're wanting to learn more about the coordinated management of meaning theory that I reference in this conversation, I'd recommend checking out the CMM Institute Substack for additional educational resources. If you're loving what you're hearing and are curious to learn more about CMM in different contexts, use the link in the show notes to follow the CMM Institute event page, where you can stay up to date with our monthly webinars hosted by yours truly. These events are an opportunity to gather with our community and explore CMM in different ways. And if you're looking to be even more connected, you can peruse our other CMM Institute initiatives, like our free social emotional learning resources, Cosmo Activities, which feature ways to engage all ages in conversations about building better social worlds. Links to all of these can be found in the show notes. As we turn toward the second half of this episode, I invite you to reconnect with your body and your environment. As the music plays to take us back to the conversation, take a breath, sink into your body wherever you are, take in your surroundings, and settle in for some more stories. Let's get back into it.
Yeah, I think these two principles are really key and shaped my thinking for sure about how I think, in the way I develop my own model of positive communication and what I teach people. In fact, the book, my book, The Art of Positive Communication, before it became that, I submitted a manuscript. I was trying to get it published, and it was called What You Say Has Consequences. And I got rid of it in part, actually, because the book was written with the dominant framework of conflict. And I thought, when I finally got the contract, I thought that's not at all how I'm teaching this now. And the big change was, we're teaching communication by constantly showing people, we're constantly showing exemplars or examples or interactions in which people are problematic. Take any textbook, and it's two people fighting, or it's a global conflict. There's nothing about, really not that many. And I do think my book was unusual in that way, where the examples are people doing good things. People expressing love,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
people, like in the world of relationship, yes, people do criticize. People do sometimes, as you displayed your own personal example, they do, but that's not all they do.
Yes.
Sometimes they share tremendous words of affection.
Mm.
Sometimes there's tremendous gentleness. Sometimes there's, um, you know, I don't know. I mean, we document this deeper connection. And again, I wanted to kind of showcase that and I wanted them to reflect
Yes.
about it, and then to see, can we have this movement from in us in ourselves, from, okay, this is how I communicate today, but can I tap into this potential that I have
Mm-hmm.
more frequently, more often? I never
Mm-hmm.
argued that it wasn't there to begin with. I think for some people they're a little further away, you know, but I think summarizing each individual as just one problematic behavior is in many ways not fair.
Yes, that's helpful to say, because even for me, I can name that I was making an assumption that, the word consequences conjures negative consequences,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yes,
there are
yes,
also positive consequences,
that's
of our
right.
actions.
That's
So I
right.
appreciate your focus on that. I'm curious about what you've learned or what has been reflected back to you about positive communication through the experience of creating and facilitating conversations, research, all that you've done, whatever you like talk about through the positive communication network.
Yeah, I mean, well, so I don't know if I can. I mean, they're kind of together, but they're also separate. So on the one hand, the positive communication network is kind of an extension of this movement,
Mm-hmm.
and me trying to create a sense of community with other scholars who are
Yeah.
interested in this, and then expanding it so that we can have expanding. I guess my biggest goal for the positive communication network was to spread the power of positive communication,
Mm-hmm.
so that people in all kinds of walks of life can do it. Because I do, this is what kind of said earlier, right? If I'm out here in the world doing it, that's awesome. And I want to do that. I want to do that with my spouse. I want to do that with my kids. I
Mm-hmm.
want to do that as a colleague. Again, I fail all the time. I don't want to. Don't listen to this podcast thinking Julian's making all these positive moves all the time. That would not be accurate.
Mm-hmm.
He tries real hard.
Yep.
And but at the same time, I thought, like, how you do have. I wanted to kind of expand that influence, because
Mm-hmm.
if we do like a conference like we have, and there's 115 people there, or 150 or 300 people attending a workshop on listening, then the ripple effect is just greater. Suddenly you've got 150 people thinking about how
Yeah.
to listen more deeply. Um, but in kind of more personally, I guess for me, so think about it this way. So in 2014, I wrote The Art of Positive Communication Theory and Practice. In that book, I developed the model. So I call it kind of the wheel of positive communication. And I would say one of the biggest surprises, how people have just embraced it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Even today, I'm trying to do talks that are different, and they're like, "No, can we, can we have you talk about this?" Um, and with my students, because I think I have a stronger sense of like how they're changing as a
Mm-hmm.
result of the class. I think the biggest surprise is how transformative it has been for them, and for me, to think about these behaviors. Like, my kind of the principles are: when you greet, you create connection; when you asking, the power of asking,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is something you started this whole podcast with. um the power of complimenting, which again, then it connects to this principle of
Yeah.
affecting others. And I think what I've noticed is, I mean, in our own life, but also seeing my students, like I'm getting these stories from students about, well, I tried this and it changed my relationship with
Mm.
this person. That's kind of a beautiful thing, like I'm thinking right now of one of my students. We're playing with this notion of greeting, and, and it seems simple, and it is simple, but not easy always.
Yes. Yeah. Great distinction.
But it's like this moving. Do I move towards other people or do I withdraw from interaction? And we
Mm-hmm.
live in a world where I think actually that's the essential tension
Hmm.
we're making. Many of us are making poor choices on, right? So I may choose my phone instead of the people around me. I may choose
Yes. Yes.
my social media account instead of reaching out to your friend. I may choose. I mean, think about how much less we are making eye contact with each other.
Yeah.
So, but that's a movement, right? I'm moving towards others. And so my student was like thinking about greetings, and then she realized that she was reflecting on this, that like when she gets up in the morning with her husband, that they had stopped greeting each other.
Mm.
And they would just like get up, eat, take care of the kids. There was no noticing. These are people who are married. This is
Mm-hmm.
as close of a relationship as you can get, right?
Yeah.
And she said, well, I started realizing that we were doing that. And then I wanted to change that. So she started greeting her husband warmly. And then that led him to start to change his behavior.
Mm.
And they noticed that the experience changed immediately. So
Wow.
when I think about positive communication, that's what I think about. I think about, and I think CMM obviously
Mm-hmm.
believes that, right? I don't know that a theory can believe anything, but you know
Yeah.
what I mean? That if I make a move,
Uh-huh.
if I change the move that I usually make and I make a different move, then now I have started a whole different sequence of relating. And
Yes.
you can debate with me. I'll tell people when I train, like, you can debate with me all day long whether or not you have time to do that, or the desire, or the
Mm.
motivation. But the reality is, if you change that move, the experience changes for you and
Yes.
for the other person.
Yes. Yes. The words that are coming to me from a CMM practitioner who's been on the podcast before, John Burnham, as he talks about changing the moment in the moment.
Yeah, that's great.
And
I love that.
it's certainly easier said than done, but I think,
Yeah,
you know,
changing the moment in the moment. I like
right?
it.
You have to have, I think you've talked about, maybe without saying this word, but like access within ourselves. Like, when can I access that better self or that better communication in terms of what are the environmental or contextual factors that allow me to be a good listener in this moment versus not? Am I hungry? Did I sleep poorly? Am
Yeah.
I annoyed at you? Like whatever the contextual factors are that influence whether or not I'm a good listener. But you're kind of layering, because like you said, it's impossible not to talk about communication skills. Skills are important, great tools, but you are hitting on something that I very strongly believe, which is like the communication skills of it can only get you so far. You have to develop the communication perspective where it becomes your lens. And I think when you go to that deeper level of, I am seeing communication as making something, and I'm seeing myself as doing that,
Right.
co-creating in relationship with others. I think that's like a prerequisite to ever have the hope of getting to a place where you can change the moment in the moment, because you start to see things through that lens of choices are being made here and
Yeah.
consequences are following as a result of those choices. And so maybe if you're like me, a very classic example of like, maybe a couple days later, I'll think of what I wish I had said
Yeah,
in the
sure. Yeah.
moment.
But never
And
anytime.
that feels like regret, but I think it's just a part of the process that, like, as you adopt a lens of communication, you start seeing, you start reflecting in that way. You go, oh, I could have made a different choice there, even if it takes you 5 days to think of that,
Yeah.
different choice you could have made. But I think the more you do that, the easier it becomes to start doing. This is language I've been playing around with, just reflecting on like my own, how did I learn about CMM? How did I get to
Yeah.
where I am, which is still an ongoing process, but I've really thought about this probably nonlinear process of seeing, doing, and being. Of
Yeah.
like, you have to see before you can do, and so that maybe speaks to the difference between a communication perspective and communication skills, which are maybe jumping right to the doing. Look at someone's forehead and not their eyes if you want to, if you're
Yeah.
afraid of making eye contact, or don't cross your arms because that's bad posture,
Right.
that invites a different kind of presence. And I just think that there's maybe something there, I guess, to be said in terms of how people who want to learn more about their communication, want to be able to make new choices, but feel like it's a far away or like unattainable thing, is to say there is a process involved here. And do you even see this? Do you even see the patterns and the turns and the coordination, to use a bunch of CMM language? Do you see that at play? And then can you just try, like you said, the try, all there is trying, I think. Can you
Yeah.
try on a new choice
Mm-hmm.
in the moment when it comes to you? Because I think it will, after
Yeah.
enough seeing, you'll
Yeah.
get there. And then can you do the doing enough that it becomes being, that it becomes a
Mm-hmm.
more embodied experience of that communication perspective?
Yeah. I mean, as you were thinking, I was, um, well, for a long time, I thought there was at least two ways of improving communication, right? And I think you're talking about a seeing, um, but I would add, I guess, knowing.
Yes. Yeah. Great
So,
point.
meaning, and I think this is what we were doing in the communication discipline.
Yeah.
We teach students. I mean, we give them a bunch of theories,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and we hope that. And I mean, I would argue you can teach theory all day long, but if students are not doing anything,
Yeah. Right.
they will know more. Okay, great. Knowledge is great, but it's also intellectualizing communication doesn't improve your communication.
Wow. Yes. Yes.
And it's not to demean the value of academic ideas. I love them. I'm an academic.
You just need them in concert with each other. You need both parts.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
want it to be, because I think it's intellectualizing is also a way of distancing from the reality
Mm-hmm.
of the
Mm-hmm.
actual task. I mean, for me, the value of studying communication still is to improve the way people communicate. It isn't to teach them to analyze. It
Mm-hmm.
is to
Sure.
teach
Sure.
them to, or even to use your word, to see. I think seeing, it is a problem of seeing, right? Good communication often. So there's knowing anyway. So I'm thinking about like this knowing and seeing, and sometimes
Yeah.
now I'm kind of in the space where, so maybe I'll come full around here. These days, I'm in the space of really thinking about this knowing and doing. So because you can know what to do,
Mm-hmm.
you can
Mm-hmm.
have all the skills in the world and still not do it.
Yes.
Right. And so sometimes you
Yes.
don't know. Okay. So the person doesn't know, doesn't have the skills, doesn't have the experience, doesn't have um, in my case, I would say that's not, in my case, that's certainly not the truth, because I know a lot about communication,
Mm-hmm.
more so than the average person.
Uh-huh.
So, and yet there are some people who don't know, have the stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're still able to do it. So there's this really interesting thing. So I'm saying all of this because in trying to answer this big puzzle about what it takes to communicate well, I do think knowing has a place. I think seeing has a place. I like that word. When I teach complimenting, complimenting is a way of seeing others, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you see the fault, or do you see,
Mm-hmm.
realize, recognize what the person is doing that brings value? And do you see that in a way? Do you see who they are in a way that emphasizes their strength?
Mm.
And yet, so for a long time, sorry, I'm trying to respond, but when I was thinking about my model, I was thinking that one way of creating change was the practicing of doing certain things.
Yeah, right.
I didn't think of them as complete skills, because to me, they're speech acts.
Yeah.
So greeting, I'm not telling people greet this way. I'm saying when you choose to greet, ideally warmly, you are,
Yes.
you are creating a connection, and the way you greet creates what kind of connection that is. But today, I also think there's this other part, which is, I've been in these situations. I don't know if you have, Abbie, but I've been in situations where it's not just that I know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I very powerfully know what to do. I'm very powerfully motivated to do it. And I still find myself unable. unable to make the move I wish I would make. And so, even with the people I love, so imagine with the people that I'm distant with, right?
Sure. Yes. Yes.
Um, so I want to think more about that today. I'm really thinking about kind of this relationship between, and I think one way then is so you start doing, and that
Mm-hmm.
improves the way you relate with other people. But a very important relationship is also the one taking place inside of you. And I think I'm realizing more and more that, I mean, it's kind of, it's like go back to Krishnamurti, but I'm realizing more than even that I am not an entity, that I am a relationship internally.
Interesting. Okay.
Any thoughts on that?
Will you say a little more about what that means to you?
So it means, and of course, in psychology, I would say, I mean, I don't know that it would be a brand new idea, right? So there's like
Mm-hmm.
the id, there's the ego, there's,
Sure.
Freud
Yeah.
had the different, but it's this notion that there's, yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Maybe the words are not quite accurate. There's like two selves.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, who are we talking to?
Yeah, well,
You're like,
that makes me think of, if you're familiar with like parts work, is a tool that I think a lot
yeah,
of therapists use that say help you, maybe, I don't know if distance is really the right word, but like distance yourself from, oh, I am this thing, I am this feeling, that is me, to
uh-huh,
like a part of me feels that way. And so I think the
sure,
image that's used a lot, and there's maybe a less corporate one, but like if you're in a boardroom and there's like a conference table, there's
mm-hmm,
all these parts of you that are sitting around this table, and maybe
sure,
one is at the head of the table more than others. And can you remove yourself from those parts where those parts are part of you, but they are not you? And so that's what's coming to mind as you're talking about I'm a relate, like within me is a relationship where it's like I have a relationship to all these parts of myself, and I
yeah,
can be generous towards them and I can be loving towards them because often they've developed because in childhood you felt that you had to be that way to protect yourself.
right,
So I can pat little Abbie on the head, the defensive part of me, and say thank you so much for how you've taken care of me. You can take a seat right now. I don't need you
yeah,
right now. We're
yeah,
going to access something else. And that feels like that's at least what I'm picturing as you're talking about I am a relationship in myself.
exactly. So, and
Okay,
then the
yeah.
way you just described it, right, is like it's you talking. You
Mm-hmm.
are There's communication taking place here. They're just not thoughts of images.
Yeah.
You are communicating. Like if you're saying, okay, little Abbie, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
I hear you. I'm here with you. And so I don't think this will complete the understanding, but I do think
Mm-hmm.
that I have to add this piece in my way of talking about
Yeah.
communication, that there's what comes out of me in the way I engage with other people. And then there's what's going on internally, the way I can
Mm-hmm.
strengthen who I am. I can acknowledge that. Like the way you described it is exactly like my friend. One of my friends told me the other day. He's been kind of struggling, and once in a while he's learned. This is very recent. Like he's 50,
Yeah.
and he's just now learning to say things like this to himself, like, "Hey, buddy," like talking to himself.
Yes.
How are you doing? He's just like greeting. He's
Yes.
greeting his own self.
Yes.
Internally, he's greeting his own self, and how powerful that is to recognize that even here you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm playing with these ideas, and I think that in order to communicate better, I guess what I would argue is that we have to improve both. It's not just seeing, it's not just knowing,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's not just doing, but we have to somehow think about both the intrapersonal communication and its
Yeah.
connection to interpersonal communication.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, that feels very important and very well said. I'm hoping that people that are listening are feeling connected to what we're talking about, maybe like examples from their own lives or, coming up of, oh, I feel like I get what they're saying because my experience is that. And that I think that's a probably in part how I think about that seeing piece, which should
Uh-huh.
be broken down into knowing and then seeing, because the awareness of it, having the language to point to something and say that's what's happening, like that is so transformative on its own. And then I would, agree with your argument of like that's powerful and it has to be followed up with the doing, because you can
Mm-hmm.
know without doing, but how are we creating better social worlds if we're never doing? Um, and so thinking back on my own experience of studying interpersonal communication, like being an undergrad, being in my intro to interpersonal communication class, and receiving this language that which was new,
Mm-hmm.
but talking about experiences which were not, because I've said this before that like my experience of learning about communication was more of a aha moment or like a sense of recognition
Yeah.
rather than, oh, you're describing a completely foreign concept and experience to me. It was, oh, I instantly can think back to an experience I've had where now I'm applying this new language to it.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking about that as an important part of the knowing. And again, maybe people that are listening are like, I'm good, I'm fully being, or I'm on my way to being. But wanting to maybe walk back a few steps with people and just not skip over the power of these stories and like what the recognition piece of this looks like. And as we're kind of, coming to a close here, I'm curious about any other stories you would want to share that come to mind that I don't want to put too fine a point on this, and ask like a leading question, but like any that demonstrate or exemplify for you the transformation that you have felt for yourself. Maybe it's, something from your own life or that you've
Mm.
seen happen. Maybe it's a student in a class of yours that you've over the course of a semester, they've shared a story or you've witnessed something in them, like the transformation of positive communication in your life or the lives of those around you as your students or through the positive communication network.
Yeah. Well, I feel that power very powerfully inside of, I mean, in my own life. I don't know that I have a specific story, but maybe it will
Sure.
come.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you that um, I see its impact every day with my own children
Mm-hmm.
and my own family. Um, it was so important to me. It really is. I say was because I think my son is graduating, so I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's a lot of emotion there. But it was so important for me to use communication in a way that would help, um, in a way that would help my children
Mm-hmm.
develop into mature, um, confident, trusting, giving
Mm-hmm.
adults.
Do you have an example of maybe something you intentionally chose to do with your children or a skill or a perspective that you've offered them that you felt like was
Well, I
how
mean,
you did
yeah,
that?
presence,
Yeah.
presence, being present, all of the behaviors I've listed, like
Yes.
I connecting with them, trying to ask about their experiences,
Mm-hmm.
being willing to have hard conversations, um, celebrating who they are,
Mm-hmm.
and not letting those words slip. I think sometimes we think very positive things. We may even feel them. I think
Mm.
the issue is we just don't let it out. We don't, and so it has no impact
Sure.
if it's just inside of you. So I do try to seize the moment. I try to relish the experience of being with them.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, I took my son. That was actually a very meaningful moment. I took my son who's graduating, and me and him took 2-3 days to go to Houston because I was trying to get him a French passport, and
Uh-huh.
because I wanted all my kids to have access to kind of both
Yes.
cultures. And there's nothing brilliant here. We're just in the car, but to be to be with him,
Mm.
engaging and hearing his stories and his thinking, there was this little moment. I guess there's this little story. I wish I could pull it up, but I was thinking of him one day and I like texted him, which, is not I was like, what are you really dreaming about these days? And it was kind of late at night. And again, we could have had this in person, but then he texted me back and he took that kind of question in the heart. And then he started listening. We started exchanging and he was saying things that it kind of blew my mind that day, because he said things like, well, what really matters is friendship. And, being a good person. Anyway, I would have to look back and look at all these elements. What I came out from that conversation, I'm thinking, and of course I know that, but to see it,
yes,
because I'm obviously very proud of him, but I thought, oh my God, he doesn't need me anymore.
Oh,
that like he has a compass.
Yeah,
he has a compass, and that compass has values.
Mm-hmm.
And these values that he has, they are guiding. They are very clear. Like he knew as the conversation unfolded. What surprised me the most is he was not hesitant about it. He wasn't.
Yeah.
He knew what values he believed in.
Mm-hmm.
And he was not just pointing them out, but I think living through them. So that's probably pretty good. I mean, to see that as a dad, I think that's, and to see that transformation. So the last thing I will say is that environment, this environment that I have with my family, is very different from the environment that I had when I was a child. And so that's for me, that's my personal transformation, because in some ways I have short-circuited what I experienced as a child with what I'm producing, creating, contributing to as an adult. And that to me probably was, I keep talking in the past, which is, I'm going to need to reflect on that. But
yes,
it was and is so important to me.
Yeah.
That if there's anything I needed to learn from taking a communication degree, its destination probably ought to impact the way I relate to my kids. And I can transform myself. And I think there's some things, that'll just be Julien will be Julien. I'll try to get a little bit better, but there's some limitations, to what we're describing here. So to make that possible for them, to me, illustrates the capacity of communication.
The thing I really want to pull out about what you've just said, what I noticed about what you've just said, is that maybe just to name my own assumption as well, is that I maybe asked that question with the assumption that you would say, oh, I talked to my kids about the compliments or the greeting thing or whatever. And obviously, like when you're teaching, you're talking about it. The whole podcast, this is me talking about things, which is important and fun for me. I love, the meta communication of it all is really valuable. But you'll notice that in what we're kind of articulating, it's not seeing, talking, being, it's doing. And you are doing as what I hear. You are doing as the invitation, and probably also talking about. But I just have come to believe that that's the most powerful invitation of like modeling, I guess. And you don't even have to think about it that way, say, oh, I'm modeling in this moment. But I think it just is a fact to me of communication that the ways that we are with each other is what gives or takes permission for the other people we're with in relationship to engage in a way or not. So if you offer that kind of presence, if you do presence in that way, then it invites other people to do presence in that way too, because I think they understand the consequential nature of it when they go, wow, I really feel what it's like when Julien gives me his undivided attention, or he doesn't, or someone else does. I can really tell the difference between those moments. So how do I want to make people feel? Now I have a kind of guide or, map or tool in my toolbox of, okay, I know now.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm going to do. It gets back to that, I guess.
Yeah, it does. And I think I know we're thinking about ending, is it's important for people to know, if you're listening to this, that the impact of improving your communication is real.
Mm-hmm.
That, and even in a personal way, I think that what you experience. So sorry, I do want to end with this point. We live in a world where 1 in 6 person around the world feels very or fairly lonely.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that 150 study from 153 countries, fairly or very lonely. So if we want to change that, the reason why people are experiencing loneliness is because of all of the dynamics of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. It's like, if we practice I-it relationships, if we practice technique over relating, if we do not make the decisions every day to connect with people, to make eye contact, we are creating a world of loneliness. That is just what we're doing. So the moment you start to say, okay, I'm going to change that, is the moment you experience with change.
Mm-hmm.
And I really hope that if you're listening, then you can look more into what positive communication is all about. And I think my proposal would be, if you try any of these behaviors, even like we talked about complimenting today, but there are others, right? Disclosing, encouraging. In my model, there are 6, but there are lots of other possibilities. People notice it right away.
Yep.
That you make a move, and that move is consequential. It has an impact. And if you make a positive move, it can have positive consequences.
Beautiful. I think that's a wonderful place to end, Julien. So I will just let that be. So thank you so much for your time and your
Thank you so much, Abbie. Yeah, I appreciate it. We went deep today.
I think we did. I'm glad we did.
But hopefully people will connect with it.
I think so. Okay, that is all for today's episode, but remember, the conversation doesn't stop just because the episode does. There are so many ways to stay in dialogue. You can email questions, reflections, ideas, and stories to storieslived.storiestold@gmail.com for a chance to be featured in an episode. You can comment on our Instagram at Stories Lived, Stories Told Pod, or the CMM Institute YouTube page to engage with other listeners. And you can subscribe to the CMM Institute Substack to make sure you're getting every episode right in your inbox. Links to all these places can be found in the show notes for this episode. Other ways you can support this podcast are by following, rating, and reviewing the show wherever you listen. Plus, please share this episode with someone you want to invite into the conversation. Stories Lived, Stories Told is an initiative of the CMM Institute for Personal and Social Evolution, an organization dedicated to furthering the coordinated management of meaning theory and practice of communication. More information about CMM can be found at cmminstitute.substack.com. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being curious, and thank you for being a part of this story. I'm Abbie, and this has been Stories Lived, Stories Told.